Hey, world history students. We've been talking about the age of exploration now in Unit 2 for a while. We've covered a lot of the details of who went where and why they went and what their motivations were. Well, today we're looking at the broad, big picture stuff. And we give this term the name Columbian Exchange because it's based off of Christopher Columbus's journey, opening up the new world and connecting the old and the new world. What did they exchange? Well, we're going to talk about that. Before we begin, make sure you know when I say the word, say old world, I'm talking about the Eastern Hemisphere. That's Europe, Asia, and Africa. This is the one that Europeans, were familiar with and knew about. So this was considered the old world, the Eastern Hemisphere, the eastern side of the earth. And then when Columbus came over and discovered the Americas, this two land masses, North and South America, were termed the New World, ones that they did not know about before that. And so this information brought about the widespread exchange of stuff from the old world coming to the new world and vice versa, the new world items coming over to the old world. And we're going to take a look at some of those items and what their effects were on both those civilizations. So in general, Columbus, is credited for the discovery of the new world in the North and South America, and bringing together those two worlds and those two civilizations brought about a mixture of plants, animals, and diseases that came from both of them. They had their own separate, ecosystems, and with that, it developed different plants, animals, and diseases along the way. When those two worlds collided, they spread, and it caused some devastating effects for certain groups of people, and it brought about some good things for certain groups of people. New things that people learned about once they got there to the new world was that they had some new crops there that they had never seen before. Things like corn, potatoes, beans, chocolate, tobacco. These types of crops had never been seen before by any Europeans, Asians, or Africans before. They had a few animals that were domesticated, not very many, especially compared to the old world. They really just had, some llamas, alpacas, and that was pretty much it. Guinea pigs, they used, believe it or not, for food back then. They farmed them kind of like we farm regular pigs. And of course, they have their own diseases that they've picked up along the way. You can see here, tuberculosis was a New World disease, polio, hepatitis, syphilis. These are some diseases they had in the old world the New World that they then brought over to the old world, and those two worlds collided in that respect. However, the disease aspect of it was much worse for the Native Americans. These diseases here were much more deadly and more easier to contract. Smallpox, as we saw in the video with guns, germs, and steel, was very, very contagious. And when you did catch it, they didn't have that natural immunity that Europeans did to the disease, and it was very deadly. Smallpox, along with measles, malaria, flu, cold, and other diseases, wiped out nearly 90 to 95% of all Native Americans in North and South America, compared to their previous totals before European contact. Some things that once these countries such as England and Spain and France had colonized these new worlds is they brought some of their old crops with them that they knew would grow really well here in the new world, where there was plenty of land, very fertile area, and they're going to start growing these things for a very large profit. We're going to talk about the plant. We talked about the plantations and the large spread items there were rice. The number one was coffee and sugarcane especially in the Caribbean and South America, where it grew very well. You got things like bananas, and then eventually cotton in the south of the United States being really big. So these were all items that they grew in the New World and brought back with them to the Old World, as in Europe. Okay, and they made a lot of money in this respect. So here's kind of a graphic depiction. You can pause it here and take a look at some of these items that came from the Old World and the New World and how they exchanged those things. All right, let's take a look at some of the effects. So what's so great about this? For starters, you have a lot of new crops. Potatoes were going to be really big in Europe, especially in Ireland and Russia and places like that. It really was very easy to grow and provided a lot of nutrients. So people's diets really improved. People were getting a lot more nutrients. There was a lot more food to go around, less starvation in certain areas. And so those New World items definitely helped in that respect. We're also seeing a lot of wealth coming out of the colonies because they're growing these crops and making a lot of money for themselves. So the people in the American colonies and the Caribbean growing the sugar cane, coffee in South America, these people are making a lot of money for these European countries. And these European countries are becoming very, very wealthy as a result. We also see some negative effects, that most obvious one being that the native populations in the Americas, because of those diseases that came from the old world, really got decimated. A whole entire 2 continents pretty much got wiped out. 90%, millions of people died from the disease that they had no natural immunity to. Europeans, Asians, and Africans had developed a genetic immunity, a tolerance, if you will, to those types of diseases, and it did not affect them as much. So it did not kill off the people from the old world like it did the new. So we see that it's much easier for them to conquer these people when there's a lot less of them and they're all dying or sick, from these diseases. They also, the Europeans that came over were making a lot of money through mercantilism, and this is an important term because this is how they made all their wealth. Basically, they said it's more important to have more exports than imports. You're going to gain money by selling more than you buy, because if you buy too much, you're going to spend all of your money. And so their goal is to sell all of their products, all of that cotton, all of that sugar cane, all of that stuff. It's going to get sold and therefore make them a lot of money. They wanted to make sure they sold more than they bought. That means that you're becoming very wealthy. And that was the idea of mercantilism, to have a favorable balance of trade where you sell more or export it more than you buy or import it. Okay, and that made these countries very, very wealthy. Not only that, but they took those goods that they grew in the New World, such as the cotton from the American colonies, brought it back to England, and then turned that into clothes, which they could then sell again. All right, so they made money from the cotton and the taxation, and they got it at a cheap price. And then they took that cheap cotton and made it into clothes and sold it again for double the profit. So it was a very lucrative deal, and it was very beneficial to the Europeans, made them very wealthy. This really started what we see as spurring on the economic revolution of capitalism. And it leads to things like we see today. That's what businesses do today still. They take products, they turn them into finished products, and they sell them to people for a profit. That's kind of where this all started. And this really globalized the society and kicked off the global capitalism, where we're seeing a lot of wealth being spread around through these businesses. Okay. Here's another great graphic representation. Make sure you understand mercantilism. Again, it's just a favorable balance of trade. You want to sell more than you're buying, because if you buy too much, you're going to be in debt, and you don't want to be in debt. You want people to buy your stuff and make a lot of money. And that's what England and France and Spain were all doing during this time. They were getting goods from the New World, turning them into final products, and then selling them. Things such as clothing from cotton textiles, rum from the sugar cane in the Caribbean, all types of products, and they're making lots of money this way through mercantilism. All right, guys, that's Unit 2, Age of Exploration. Make sure you go over the stuff, rewatch whatever parts you need to, ask me any questions, highlight, rewind, all those good things. I don't know what you don't know unless you tell me. So you got to make sure you speak up and value your own education. All right.